I don't know who needs to hear this today, but just because it happened to you doesn't mean it has to define you. See, we serve a God who doesn't just work in the miracles. He works in the middle, in the mess, in the process. We're so quick to ask God to fix it, change it, remove it. But what if God is trying to process you through it? That pain you keep replaying, that storm you thought would break you, that disappointment that still stings, God isn't ignoring it, He's using it. But you've got to let Him process it with you. Because if you process it alone, you'll start labeling yourself by what hurt you. You'll start calling yourself broken when God is calling you becoming. You'll start seeing that moment as the ending when God is saying, I'm just getting started. We want quick healing, instant peace, microwave solutions, but God is a slow cooker. He's not trying to give you a shortcut. He's trying to give you strength. That's why you're still in it, because He's not done forming you. You see, when you bring your pain to God, He doesn't just cover it, He transforms it. What the enemy meant for evil, God will use for excellence. But you've got to stay in the process. You've got to keep showing up. You've got to let God work on the unseen before He releases the unbelievable. Stop running from what God is using to raise you. Stop cursing what God is trying to cultivate. Stop bearing what God wants to breathe on. The blessing is not just on the other side of the battle. The blessing is in the process of how God builds you through it. So today, let God help you process. Your story isn't over. Your struggle isn't wasted. And your process with Him will produce something beautiful. God works in the process, not just the outcome. That's a hard truth to grasp when you're stuck in the middle of something you didn't ask for, didn't see coming, and definitely don't understand. We're conditioned to celebrate the outcome, to clap when the healing happens, to post the testimony when the promotion comes, to shout when the prayer is answered. But what about when you're still in the hallway, waiting for a door to open? What about when you're stuck between the diagnosis and the deliverance, between the breakdown and the breakthrough? That's the place where God does some of His deepest work, not in the finished thing, but in the forming of it. We often look at process like it's punishment. We think that if it's hard, it must not be holy. If it's painful, it must not be God. But process is not punishment, it's preparation. It's not a delay in your destiny, it's the development of it. Because while we're begging God to pull us out, He's preparing us to stand stronger. He's building endurance, patience, faith, and trust in places where we only saw weakness. Pain has a way of making you pay attention. Confusion has a way of humbling you. Waiting has a way of revealing your idols. And in all of that, God is not distant. He is deliberate. He is shaping things in you that will sustain the very blessing you've been asking for. He's stripping off the pride, the self-reliance, the fear you've been masking with performance. He's pruning not to punish you, but to make room for more fruit. Because He sees what's ahead and He knows what it will take to carry it. We want clarity, but God wants trust. We want control, but God wants surrender. And it's in the process that we start learning how to walk by faith, not by sight. Because when you can't trace His hand, you have to learn to trust His heart. When nothing makes sense and everything feels upside down, that's when God shows you that His presence isn't tied to your preference. He's not only with you when you win, He's with you in the wilderness. He's not only moving when you feel momentum, He's moving in the... And let's be honest, there are some things you only learn when everything falls apart. There are some parts of God you only experience when you're broken enough to reach for Him. The process teaches you to lean, not lead. It teaches you to listen, not just talk. It refines your prayers. It rearranges your priorities. It reshapes your perspective. What you thought was a detour becomes the main road. What you thought was a delay becomes divine alignment. What you thought was the end becomes the beginning of something deeper. It doesn't feel holy and it doesn't feel good, but God doesn't waste any of it. Not the tears, not the questions, not the nights when your faith felt like it was running on fumes. He's present in the pressure. And while you're trying to rush to the result, He's working in the rhythm of your becoming. You want to be delivered, but God wants you developed. You want the testimony, but God is writing it in real time through every step of your struggle. Because God is not just concerned with what you're walking to, He's deeply involved in how you walk through. Healing isn't always instant. That's something we don't like to hear, especially in a culture that craves quick fixes and instant results. We want the pain to stop. We want the anxiety to leave. We want the broken relationship to be mended overnight. And when it's not, when healing doesn't happen on our timeline, we start to wonder if it's ever going to come at all. But what if the healing isn't being withheld? What if it's being woven day by day, piece by piece, layer by layer, into who you're becoming? There are some wounds that God doesn't remove right away, not because He can't, but because He's working something deeper within you. He's not just trying to heal what happened to you, He's trying to heal how you see it, how you carry it, how you let it shape your identity. Sometimes the slow process is the most sacred part. It's where strength is built, not just on the outside, but on the inside. It's where you learn to breathe again, to trust again, to forgive again. It's where your surface level faith grows roots. We often ask God to heal us, and we expect it to look like a sudden miracle, and sometimes it does. But more often, healing looks like daily obedience. It looks like choosing peace when anxiety comes knocking. It looks like forgiving someone, even when the apology never came. It looks like showing up to therapy, opening the Bible, talking to God, even when you don't feel anything changing yet. It's in those small, unseen moments that healing starts to take hold, quietly, slowly, deeply. God is not in a rush, because He's not just trying to fix your situation. He's forming your spirit. He's developing the kind of character that doesn't collapse under pressure. He's cultivating the kind of purpose that's rooted in more than comfort or convenience, and that takes time. You don't build endurance in a moment. You don't develop maturity in an instant. Healing that lasts is healing that grows slow. Sometimes we confuse silence with absence. We think if we don't feel better, God must not be working. But healing often begins before you ever feel it. God starts restoring what you can't even name yet. He begins untangling lies you didn't know you believed. He peels back the layers of trauma, disappointment, shame, not to expose you, but to free you. And each layer He peels is part of the process. Each step forward, even if it's messy or clumsy or filled with tears, is part of the progress. And maybe the most powerful thing about healing is that it doesn't just affect you. As God forms something new in you, He starts writing a story that others will one day find hope in. That scar you're ashamed of now might become the testimony that sets someone else free. The process you're tempted to hide might become the very proof that God is a healer, even when it doesn't happen instantly. So when the pain lingers longer than you hoped, when you wonder if it's ever going to be better, when you're tempted to give up because the miracle hasn't come, remember that slow healing is still real healing. And God isn't just healing what hurt you. He's preparing who you're becoming through it. What hurt you doesn't have to define you. That's not just a comforting phrase. It's a declaration of truth. Because pain has a way of attaching labels to us. The betrayal says you're unworthy. The loss says you're forgotten. The failure says you're not enough. And before you know it, the wound starts speaking louder than the word. But the thing about God is He never calls you by your wound. He calls you by your name. He doesn't identify you by what happened to you. He identifies you by what He put in you. There's a real enemy that would love nothing more than to freeze you in the moment that broke you. He wants to keep you stuck in the story of what went wrong, stuck in the shame of what you did or what was done to you. He wants to convince you that your past is who you are. But God didn't save you to leave you there. He didn't bring you this far to let a scar steal your identity. Because in his hands, your wound doesn't disqualify you, it equips you. God doesn't erase your pain, but he does redeem it. He takes what tried to bury you and turns it into a platform. The very thing that caused you to hide becomes the very thing he uses to bring healing to someone else. That's how good he is. That's how powerful his grace is. What was meant to define your defeat becomes the headline of your deliverance. It's not about pretending the pain didn't happen. It's not about minimizing it or covering it up with fake smiles and empty churchy phrases. It's about recognizing that God meets you right there, in the raw, in the real, in the place where you almost gave up. He steps into that exact moment and starts writing a new narrative, one where you're not just the victim, you're the vessel. And when you allow him into that place, your wound becomes part of your witness. That scar becomes a story that sings of God's mercy. That heartbreak becomes a doorway for someone else to find hope. Because God doesn't just want to heal you privately, he wants to use your healing publicly. He wants to use the very thing you thought disqualified you to bring freedom to others. You may have been rejected, but that doesn't make you unlovable. You may have been broken, but that doesn't make you unusable. You may have fallen, but that doesn't make you a failure. You are not your trauma. You are not your mistake. You are not your history. You are who God says you are, redeemed, restored, chosen, and covered. There is power in choosing not to let the pain name you. There is freedom in letting God rewrite the label. And there is healing in watching him turn your wounds into a weapon against the very darkness that tried to destroy you. Because your past might explain you, but it doesn't define you. God does. And what defines you in him is not what hurt you, but what he's doing through you now. The enemy's attacks can become God's tools. That might sound strange at first. How could the very thing that was designed to destroy you be used to develop you? But that's exactly how God works. He doesn't just block the weapon. Sometimes he lets it form so he can flip it. What the enemy meant for evil, God repurposes for growth. That betrayal you barely survived, that season of loneliness that almost broke you, that mistake you thought would ruin everything, in the hands of God, none of it is wasted. The enemy is strategic. He knows your insecurities, your fears, your weak points. He aims to break you down where it hurts the most, but what he always underestimates is the power of a God who takes broken things and builds from them. The enemy brings chaos, and God brings clarity through it. The enemy brings pressure, and God produces purpose from it. The enemy attacks to destroy your identity, and God allows it to reveal who you really are in him. The very thing you thought would be the end of you can become the beginning of something new. That fight you didn't ask for might just be the fire that forges your faith. That attack that made you question everything could be the avenue God uses to deepen your dependence on him. Because God doesn't just rescue you from battles, he refines you through them. And that's where growth happens. Not when everything is easy, not when the road is smooth. Growth happens in resistance. Strength is built in tension. Faith is born in the fight. So while the enemy wants you to believe the attack disqualifies you, God wants to show you how it's qualifying you. You're being trained in the trial. You're being developed in the difficulty. And the tools the enemy used to harm you are being forged into weapons for your purpose. The enemy thought the rejection would ruin you, but it taught you how to love yourself without applause. He thought the heartbreak would harden you, but it taught you how to lean on the love of God like never before. He thought the failure would silence you, but it gave you a new voice, one rooted in humility, one drenched in real grace. God is not surprised by the attack. He's sovereign over it. That doesn't mean he caused it, but it does mean he can use it. There's nothing the enemy can throw at you that God can't redeem. The storm doesn't scare him. The darkness doesn't disarm him. In fact, God often uses the very attack as the setup for elevation. The enemy's plan becomes the pathway for promotion when God steps in. So instead of asking why the attack came, maybe it's time to ask what God is building through it. Because the pain wasn't random, the struggle wasn't pointless, and the wound wasn't the final word. In God's economy, nothing is wasted. Every hit you took is being transformed into holy ground. Every low moment is becoming a launching pad. Every attack is turning into an assignment. That's why you're still standing. Not because it didn't hurt, but because God is turning the very weapon that was meant to wound you into a tool that's shaping the warrior He created you to be. Staying in the process brings transformation. That's the part we often want to skip. We want the healing without the waiting, the growth without the stretching, the breakthrough without the breaking. But real transformation doesn't happen in the moment things change. It happens in the moments you choose to stay, even when nothing has changed yet. We think faith is proven in the big, loud declarations, but faith is really proven in the quiet decision to keep showing up, to stay in the process when it's uncomfortable, when it's unclear, when it feels like nothing is working. It's easy to be faithful when you're seeing results. It's something else entirely to stay faithful when it looks like God is silent, when prayers feel unanswered, when the process feels longer than you ever imagined. But here's the truth. Transformation doesn't happen on the mountaintop. It happens in the valley. It happens in the ordinary, daily choices. In the moments when no one sees the tears, the questions, the effort. God does His deepest work in the hidden places. And it's in the staying in the process, in the tension, in the waiting, that something inside you starts to shift. Not just your circumstances. We want to get fixed, but God wants us formed. Fix says make it stop. Form says make me strong. Fix says change the situation. Form says change me through it. Because the truth is, God is not just trying to get you out of what you're going through. He's trying to grow you in it. And that takes staying power. Staying doesn't mean you understand everything. It means you trust through the mystery. Staying doesn't mean you don't feel fear. It means you choose faith anyway. Staying doesn't mean you don't get tired. It means you don't quit when you are. Because some of the greatest breakthroughs come not to the strongest, but to those who refuse to walk away. There's something sacred about the process. It refines what comfort can't touch. It reveals who you are when everything else is stripped away. It teaches you how to rely on grace instead of performance, presence instead of results. When you stay in the process, you give God access not just to the surface issues, but to the deep places in your heart where real transformation begins. Sometimes we confuse spiritual maturity with outward success. But real maturity is staying in the process even when you feel nothing changing. It's worshiping in the middle of the storm. It's obeying when you don't have the outcome. It's holding on to promises when you feel pressure. And it's in those moments that God shapes the version of you that can carry the weight of the calling He's placed on your life. This isn't about perfection. It's about perseverance. It's not about having it all together. It's about not giving up when everything feels like it's falling apart, and that choice to stay, to lean in, to trust again, even after disappointment. That's where the transformation begins. Because at the end of the day, staying isn't weakness, it's warfare. It's the refusal to bow to fear, to give in to doubt, to walk away just because it's hard. It's the quiet strength that says, God, I don't have to understand it. I just have to trust you through it. And in that place, God does more than fix what's broken. He forms something brand new, something stronger, something that can only be born through the process. God sees your becoming, not just your breaking. That's what makes His love so different, so unlike anything we've ever known, because people tend to define you by the moment they met you, by the mess you made, by the mistake they heard about. But God, He sees past your breaking point and speaks to the person you're becoming, even when you don't see it yourself. We see our brokenness and assume that's all there is. We replay the failure. We sit in the shame. We relive the worst parts of our story and think it disqualifies us from walking into anything new. But God doesn't see you through the lens of your failure. He sees you through the lens of your future. He looks at the pieces on the ground and calls out the masterpiece he's still shaping. God doesn't just tolerate your brokenness, he meets you right in the middle of it. And not to condemn you, not to remind you of what you did, but to restore you, to remind you that who you were in your worst moment is not who you are in his eyes. He's not calling you by your weakness, he's calling you by your destiny. You might feel like you're stuck in a cycle, like no matter how hard you try, you keep slipping back into the same patterns, the same fears, the same regrets. But even there, God is speaking a better word over you. He calls you redeemed when you still feel rejected. He calls you chosen when you feel cast aside. He calls you strong when all you feel is broken, because he sees what's developing in you, not just what's hurting. God called Gideon mighty warrior while he was hiding. He called Peter the rock while he was still unstable. He called Paul while he was still Saul, still persecuting the very church he'd later help build. That's what God does. He names you by your calling, not your condition. He doesn't wait until you've got it all figured out. He speaks life into you while you're still in the middle of your becoming. We disqualify ourselves because of what we've done, but God qualifies us based on what he's doing. You see failure, God sees formation. You see a mess, God sees material. The very places that feel too far gone are the exact places he wants to breathe new life into, because he doesn't need a perfect vessel, he just needs a willing one. When God looks at you, he doesn't see the version of you defined by past decision. He sees the version of you formed by grace, molded by mercy, empowered by purpose. That's why he keeps calling you forward even when you keep looking back. That's why he keeps extending grace even when you're tempted to give up, because he knows what he put in you and he knows what he's bringing out of you. This is not the end of your story. You are not your worst moment. You are not your most broken place. You are not your fear, your past, or your mistake. You are becoming something greater, something stronger, something God saw in you before you ever saw it in yourself. And he hasn't changed his mind about you, not once. So maybe today isn't about fixing everything. Maybe it's not about figuring it all out or feeling strong or pretending the process doesn't hurt. Maybe it's just about staying in it, trusting that God is still working even when you don't see it. Believing that your wound still carries worth, that your waiting is not wasted, that your becoming is still unfolding, because the same God who started the work in you is faithful to finish it, and he never called you by your failure. He's calling you forward, calling you deeper, calling you higher. And if you don't quit, if you just keep walking, even with a limp, he'll turn every breaking into becoming, every pain into purpose, every process into promise.